What's the quickest way you've seen a friend mess up their life? Story 1. I knew a kid who was hanging out with his friends in his dad's study. He pulled out his dad's handgun from a hiding spot and started pointing it at things, trying to act cool. His friends told him to knock it off and stop being stupid. To prove he knew what he was doing and that it was safe, he took out the magazine, put the gun to the roof of his mouth, and pulled the trigger, forgetting there was still a round in the chamber. He blew the back of his head off right in front of his friends. The saddest part was seeing the aftermath, as his friends who witnessed it and his family who blamed his father destroyed themselves trying to cope with the consequences of his reckless mistake. Story 2. He killed his bully in middle school. He was constantly taunted, insulted, and assaulted both physically and mentally. He was mugged on a daily basis and nearly had his neck broken. The school wouldn't do anything about the bullies. It wasn't even a bad part of town, but it had some really awful kids. One day, the self-proclaimed king of the bullies decided he was going to ruin my friend's day for good by trying to break his knees with a bat. As my friend stepped up to the plate to bat, he got ready for the pitch. The pitcher, who wasn't affiliated with the bullies, threw the ball too far inside and forced my friend to duck, saving his head from both the ball and the bat that was being swung from behind. My friend noticed and instinctively swung the bat in a full MLB-style swing, connecting with the bully's skull and completely shattering it. The bully dropped dead instantly. The coaches immediately tackled my friend to the ground and called the police. He was arrested and charged with murder. To this day, I don't know if he's alive or dead, but I do know that if the school had done its job, he never would have been forced to defend himself like that. It's complete bullshit that the very people who preach about supporting anti-bullying measures are the same ones who stand by and do nothing until something tragic happens. Gary was a genuinely good guy who would help anyone in need. He even helped carry me to the nurse once after my own group of bullies blinded me with sand and dirt when they tripped me. Screw the school system, and screw the people who act like he was the criminal when he was the one who endured 4 years of torture. Story 3. One of my best friends stopped seeing her therapist and taking her medication for anxiety and panic attacks. She ignored all of our attempts to convince her that she needed to stay in treatment. She started going out clubbing 3 to 4 times a week to avoid thinking about her problems, spent way too much money, and then made her anxiety worse when she couldn't pay her bills. To escape that stress, she would go out again, and the cycle just kept repeating. She failed her final quarter after 4 years at university. She literally only had to make it through that last quarter to get her degree, but she didn't. She's doing okay now, but to move forward in her career, she'd need a master's degree, and that's just not going to happen. Story 4. She got pregnant by a guy she had just met, and within 3 months they were married and had moved to Japan. Now they're getting a divorce after having a save-the-marriage baby, and the relationship has been extremely rocky the entire time. She's always been the type to get bored quickly, especially in relationships, and she had even said before that she never wanted kids or marriage. To go from that to getting pregnant, married, and moving overseas so fast was just insane. When she left, she took the kids away from him, even though he's a great dad and was a decent husband, and moved from Virginia to Pennsylvania to Hawaii, each time chasing a fresh start. I really hope things work out for her, but it drives me crazy. Story 5. Getting pregnant in college because she was messing around with a guy who already had 1 kid he couldn't take care of. Edit. Everything actually turned out okay, I guess. She wanted the father to have a say, and he's genuinely a good guy, even if a bit immature. At the time, he was pursuing a master's in political science. I went to visit shortly before the baby was born, dragged him out onto the porch, and told him to his face that if he ruined my friend's life or the kid's life with his selfishness, I would kill him. A few months later, he put school on hold and went to work at his dad's oil company, making about $70K a year, and he's doing a good job there. I'm actually proud that he turned things around. My friend gave up a managerial job when he took that position, and she and I had a heart-to-heart over the phone. I reminded her that if she kept the job, together they'd make enough money to send their kid to a great Montessori school, buy a house, and build stability. She ended up quitting anyway to finish her degree, a BS in biology, and she's almost done now. They eventually were able to buy a house, and their kid is doing great. But honestly, they got lucky that the baby's grandfather had a company where the dad could work. I really wanted to help them, so I even ended up buying a bunch of baby gear before she was born: stroller, pack and play, high chair, and more. Story 6. I had a friend who found religion. Within a year of joining his new faith, he was arrested, tried, and convicted of child abuse. But he only got time served because he was considered religious enough by the judge. His new church friends showed up to support him every day of his trial. He never denied committing the crime. His defense was that what he did wasn't actually a crime. His wife left him soon after, took the kids he had physically abused, and he hasn't seen them since. He later remarried someone from his church and now routinely shows up to commit violence in the name of his God at women's health facilities and other places tied to faiths different from his own. He also beats his new wife until she needs hospitalization, but she isn't allowed to leave him. He's constantly being arrested for these crimes, but he doesn't seem to care. His church bails him out, pays for his defense, and when he does have to serve time, he sees it as an opportunity to convert other prisoners to his faith. Because of his religion, he rarely gets more than the minimum sentence, no matter how serious his crimes are. Story 7. Not a friend, my only brother. The golden boy, handed everything on a silver platter. Basically treated like a prince in our family. Golf scholarship, tons of friends, women throwing themselves at him. But underneath it all, he's a supreme prick, a nasty person who acts like a douchebag all days. He started drinking heavily at 15, cheap disgusting $3 a pint booze. Which is ridiculous, since we come from money. Buy something decent and stop chain-smoking menthols, but whatever. He hit it well until 2015. Full liver failure a week after his 29th birthday. Begs my parents for a second chance at life, crying that he needs help. He wants to live, blah blah blah. Here's the fast part. My parents managed to get him a full liver transplant within 2 months, which would have been impossible without using my sisters and my inheritance. Addicts aren't exactly high on the list for transplants. He barely survived, did rehab, AA, the whole 9 yards. Mayo Clinic started calling. Hey, asshole isn't coming to his mandatory appointments. Is he rejecting the organ he doesn't deserve? Mom forced him to go. He dropped dirty for coke, booze, and weed. He is now dead to me and most of my family. Absolute garbage. Has 4 years or less to live. And my mom is basically his slave because he cries that he needs her, and she's too weak to throw his ass in a home. That liver could have gone to 8 people who actually gave a damn about their lives. In my mind, he's a murderer who stole someone else's second chance. I hate him. Edit. I'm a woman, not a guy. The inheritance was left by my grandfather, and my parents cashed out mine and my sister's share since mom was executor of the estate. My parents have their own money but spend ours instead. My sister and I always worked. Both of us graduated college, and we never asked for handouts like my prick brother. I have kids, and I'm married to an active duty enlisted TSGT. We're not wealthy at all. It's not about mourning money I didn't physically have yet. It's the principle. Mom told us after the fact. My brother is a worthless piece of shit. Verbally abusive but charming, manipulative, highly addictive personality. Pretty sure he's a sociopath. Yes, you can buy an organ. Everything has a price. And no, I don't have to tolerate his existence just because we're related. It drains my soul to even imagine being in the same state as him. I plan to see him again only at his funeral. I had to literally hold my mom up before his transplant and call our priest for last rites. I had to arrange his cremation because she couldn't do it. Plan his funeral while she wept silently, wringing her hands and praying under her breath. It was horrifying to see my mom suffer like that. I watched her age right in front of me while he was in a coma, years falling off her life. The heartbreak was unfathomable. Her hair turned white at 52 from sorrow. And he survives just to drink again and do cocaine? After basically killing himself with cheap booze in the first place? Fuck him. I'd end him myself if I could. He just isn't worth the prison time. Story 8. There was a girl in my PhD program whose dad died a few months before she was supposed to take her comprehensive exams. Basically the halfway point in a PhD. Obviously, that's a tough thing to go through, but her dad was well into his 80s and had been in hospice for several months, so it wasn't like it came out of nowhere. Even though she had plenty of time to prepare herself, she had a complete meltdown after his death. She made no effort to study for her exams, and instead went out partying every single night. Prepping for comps usually means studying non-stop, morning to night, every day for about 3 months straight. During this time, she kept posting status updates about how she needed to finish her PhD for her dad, who had been so excited that she'd be the family's first doctorate. She failed the exams, but school policy allowed her a second attempt the next semester. Unfortunately, she learned nothing from her first failure. She continued partying every night, didn't study, and still kept talking about honoring her dad's legacy by finishing her PhD. Then, for reasons no one ever understood, she turned on all of her friends in the program. She never gave any explanation. She just suddenly refused to talk to any of us. She also divorced her husband and fell in with a group of guys she met during her nights out, refusing to interact with anyone else. Not surprisingly, she failed her comps again and was kicked out of the program. Suddenly, finishing her PhD in honor of her father wasn't a priority anymore. Instead, her Facebook was full of rants about how everyone in the program, including the friends she had cut off, was out to get her, never supported her, and never truly cared. Those accusations really hurt a lot of people who had genuinely been there for her. She quickly shifted to saying she was thrilled to be free of all the haters in our program. Meanwhile, she was posting new photo albums of her partying with this new group of friends every single day. I'm talking 50 or 60 new club pics waiting on my feed every morning. Honestly, I don't think even the most self-absorbed teenage girls post a tenth as many pictures as she did. I eventually blocked her because it was unbearable. At some point, she unfriended me and everyone else in the program, except, weirdly enough, the department's student secretary. Last I heard, she was working as a secretary herself, dating one of the guys from her new circle, and basically nothing has changed. Story 9. He took his own life. He was a musician who started making electronic music and got popular very quickly. He even signed a record contract, but admitted he never really cared about the music. It was just something he did because people praised him for it. He was always depressed and often talked about suicide, but as friends we'd always try to talk him out of it. Then one day he just did it. He was in his mid-20s. He used a bed sheet to hang himself in his bathroom, and his girlfriend was the one who found him. That moment made me face my own struggles with depression and suicidal thoughts. I decided to swallow my pride and go to the doctor. The first pill I was prescribed completely changed my life. It might seem like there's no way out, but there is always help. Even if you feel like you have nobody, there is help. He had tons of friends, but still felt alone. I had been depressed my entire life, but finally trying antidepressants was the best decision I've ever made. I signed up for the cheapest health insurance I could find, went to the first doctor they assigned me, and took the first medication prescribed, and it worked. It may take a few tries to find what works for you, but is it worth it to finally feel happy? To feel free, light, and like yourself again? Yes, absolutely. With my terrible insurance, I only pay $20 a month for my meds. That's dirt cheap for mental health. If you're feeling suicidal, please look into it. It won't magically solve all your problems, but it can stop the downward spiral of depression and give you the stability you need to seek further help. Do it for yourself. Story 10. One of my high school friends was just 2 days away from graduating early and skipping the second half of senior year. But then, a guy who had been bullying him for years started a fight with him. My friend finally snapped, pulled out a knife, and stabbed the guy in the back. Afterward, he panicked and decided to turn himself into the school administration, thinking it would be worse for him if the incident got reported later. The bully walked away completely free of charges, while my friend ended up with a felony on his record, 18 months in prison, years of probation, and thousands of dollars in fees, plus extra fees for not being able to pay them off on time. I'm not saying what he did was right, but the school administration had completely dropped the ball for years. They overlooked countless hostile acts instead of dealing with the bullying problem. It wasn't surprising, honestly, since our school's attitude was basically that you either let yourself get beaten up or you run away. Explaining it to my relatives later that night, when they called asking, "Wasn't he your friend?" was not fun. Story 11. Using a burner here, but forget the friend part. I'll just tell you how I screwed up my own life. I went through high school with a great GPA, graduated in the top 10 of my class, played sports, was homecoming king, the whole cliche story. I joined the National Guard at 17. I didn't drink, had never even seen drugs, and was well behaved. Then I went away to college and started drinking. Heavily. Alcohol led to weed. I started smoking occasionally, then moved into a house with a friend who happened to sell weed. Pretty soon I was going to class high, or skipping altogether. My freshman GPA dropped from 3.8 my first semester to 1.2 the second. I tried to get my grades back up, so I turned to Adderall. I'd stay up all night doing homework, sleep all day, skip class, then get drunk and high whenever I had the chance. That escalated into cocaine, Molly, and more skipped classes. One semester my GPA was a 0.78. Terrible. One day I came home from a court-ordered alcohol class from my second minor to find our front door busted in. The DEA had raided our house because of my roommate. Someone wore a wire on him. I was charged with 3 misdemeanors and a felony, possession of Adderall. I got kicked out of school. My parents wouldn't even talk to me. I had a felony charge, no job, and was living hours from home. My life spiraled into an all-out drinking binge. Luckily, I come from an amazing family. My dad finally broke his silence by hiring the best lawyer he could find. I got a deferred sentence, over 100 hours of community service, a year of probation, outpatient addiction classes 4 times a week, and a hefty fine. The month after my probation ended, I was deployed. I spent a year in Iraq as a squad leader and came back with my head on straight. I went before the board at the college that had kicked me out and pleaded for another chance. They let me back in on probationary terms. I grabbed that opportunity and didn't let go. I turned my whole life around, graduated with close to a 3.0, despite restarting with a 1.3, landed a job right out of college, got promoted within a year, and now I'm making really good money. Story 12. Smoking spice instead of weed just to pass a urine test. A guy I know, and his brother too, got hooked on it badly. They basically turned into zombies. The whole idea was to be able to test clean and still have fun, so they could keep decent jobs while partying on the side. But it got so bad that neither of them could function properly anymore. I'd see them at parties, and they'd just melt into whatever piece of furniture they landed on. One of them once parked on the side of a back road to smoke, fell asleep behind the wheel, and was found by a cop who thought he was dead. When what looked like a corpse suddenly started groaning and moving, the cop freaked out and drew his gun. He assumed it was an opioid overdose, so he had him taken to the hospital and then to jail. The vehicle got impounded, and since he couldn't function well enough to work anymore, it sat there for a long time. Meanwhile, his younger brother totaled his own car. They were both jonesing so hard for spice that they actually walked miles to try and break into the impounded truck, hoping the stash was still in the cab. Needless to say, more jail time. All of this happened within just 2 or 3 months. Now they both work at the same grocery store and are noticeably slow in the head. 2 totally different people than they once were. Guys who actually had potential at one point. Story 13. Sophomore year, a friend of mine met and fell hard for her very first boyfriend. I never understood what she saw in him. He was 18, never finished school, spoke really slow, and was obese. Within 3 months, she got pregnant, dropped out of school, had her parents sign for her to get married at 16, and never earned her GED, and neither did he. By 21, she already had 3 kids, was living in a trailer park, and working as a hotel housekeeper while he bounced between jobs. I ran into her last year at a Walmart when I was visiting my hometown for Christmas, and she was drunk. She broke down crying, telling me how badly she'd messed up her life, and that she was finally leaving him after 12 years because she had met a Mexican man. Then she suddenly got hostile, asking if I thought I was better than her just because I married my military sexy man. At that point, I noped out of the situation. After getting pregnant by the Mexican man, she went back to her husband, and now they pretend the baby is his. I still have her on Facebook because the whole situation is like a train wreck I can't look away from. She constantly calls out his family for not accepting their situation, and they publicly call her a whore. She went from being an A student with a clear path to a good college to a pregnant dropout in just 3 months, and now she's basically the queen of white trash. All because of a guy. Story 14. I had a friend in high school in the late 90s in San Francisco. Back when computers were just starting to become popular, he was smart enough to take them apart, upgrade them, and even fix software issues at what was basically an IT level. He's the one who got me into computers. He taught me so much that I honestly think he kept me away from the bad crowd of kids who did drugs, drank, smoked, or joined gangs. That's why this story is sad for me, because my friend wasn't supposed to end up the way he did. He didn't like school. He wasn't into drugs or trouble. He just had no interest in classes. He didn't care about the social side of school either. He felt like it only got in the way of what he really wanted to do. From what I could tell, he had two passions: riding bikes and graphic animation. He rode with Critical Mass every Friday, the big group of cyclists in San Francisco who basically hated cars. On weekends, he would download every program he could find in AOL Whereas rooms to create animation. He got his hands on 3D Studio Max, Softimage, AutoCAD, Photoshop, Illustrator, Bryce 3D, you name it. For context, Softimage was the program used to create the dinosaurs in Jurassic Park and cost $15,000 or $30,000 at the time, and it required a hardware dongle to even run. He downloaded cracks so he could use it for free. That was the level he was operating at. He'd also download animation shorts and books just to study how to use those programs. That was his whole life, until he started making a series of bad decisions during senior year. First, he got caught stealing a cell phone from Costco. This was back when cell phones were just becoming mainstream. He thought he could outsmart loss prevention. He couldn't. He went to juvenile hall. Then he dropped out of high school just a few months shy of graduating, for no real reason. He still wanted to be an animator, though, so he stayed home reading animation books and convinced his mom to spend big money on a dual-processor Intergraph computer and a legitimate copy of 3D Studio Max. But his biggest problem was his ego and his lack of talent. He couldn't draw at all. His art was just rebranded storylines stolen from Pixar and other people's work. He downloaded free files other animators put online and tried to pass them off as his own. When the rest of us graduated and went off to college, we convinced him to try too. He bounced around a few art schools but dropped out of all of them. He had an ego that Donald Trump would envy. He complained that professors didn't recognize the art in his kindergarten-level work, or that the other students were too dumb to understand his creative vision. Truth is, he just sucked. He couldn't handle even freshman-level stress and quit for good. After that, he tried studying on his own and shopping his portfolio around for jobs. But he had no people skills, and his work wasn't even at an amateur level. Meanwhile, graduates from actual art schools had professional quality portfolios. He never got hired. He quit after a few failed attempts. What he never understood was that it's not about having the best tools. It's about what you can actually do with them. Last I heard, he was working as a mechanic under his brother. Meanwhile, other friends of ours went on to real careers. One of them actually became a professional graphic animator. Running into both of them later on was awkward, to say the least. Sometimes, you don't need drugs or crime to ruin your life. Sometimes, you can be your own downfall. Story 15. I had a friend who had just turned 18 and was on the path to becoming a doctor. He was really interested in chemistry, and near the end of the school year, he took some chemicals from the science lab, brought them home, and mixed them in a plastic milk bottle out in front of his house. The mixture was so volatile that when a single drop hit the concrete where he was kneeling, the entire bottle ignited in his hand, blowing it off completely. He didn't even realize what had happened until he raised his hands to his ears and saw that everything down to his wrist was gone. They later found pieces of his hand scattered on rooftops in the area. He had to undergo a procedure where a machine picked out every single microscopic shard of glass from his eyeballs. In the end, he never pursued medicine. He wound up working for a storage unit company instead. It was absolutely heartbreaking. He was a genuinely kind guy, just curious about chemistry. There was never any malice in what he was doing. Story 16. My ex-girlfriend. This was back during my days in the Klan. I had been a member for most of my youth. When I was as young as 8, I was already at the front of rallies. Women and children were part of it too. On the surface, it all looked family-friendly, aside from the constant hate speech, of course. When I was about 15, I started dating a girl who was also in the Klan. I loved her because she seemed sweet and caring. But after about a year, she changed. She started violently attacking people. Gay people, black people, anyone who didn't fit the Klan's twisted idea of a perfect world. It hurt, because she was someone so close to me, yet she was becoming unrecognizable, a complete stranger. One day I finally told her, "I'm leaving the Klan. You can either walk away with me, or stay here. Your call." She chose to stay. The next day, I loaded up my truck and drove to Kansas City. I donated my hood and robes to a museum in Wichita. My belief is that just because we have ugly, shameful chapters in our past doesn't mean we should ignore them. We should study and learn from them so we never repeat them. I like to think that now I stand for equal treatment of all people, men, women, and children of every color and creed. At the end of the day, they're all still human beings. Story 17. I went to college and became friends with a guy in my major. We both graduated and even landed jobs at the same prestigious professional services firm. At first, it was pretty exciting, starting a career at a big firm with a friend by my side. We knew it would be tough, but we promised to help each other out and give ourselves an edge compared to others starting alone. Entering the real world was intimidating, but having a friend there made it easier. Just weeks earlier, we were eating cups of noodles, and now we were going to fancy restaurants, taking Ubers instead of public transportation, and paying with company cards. It was a huge shift. We felt like we were moving up in the world. If we stuck it out and endured the grind, we knew it would open doors to interviews at other top firms, higher salaries, and eventually the kind of life we dreamed of: a house, a new car, stability, the whole package. But there was one big problem. My friend was addicted to video games. In college, I never thought much of it. Everyone gamed, right? But at work, it became clear how bad it was. At a place like this, they want you putting in the hours, building billable work, not rushing home to game. He would call in sick often or leave the office right at 5 p.m. sharp, even though the work wasn't done. He almost never met his billable goals. In professional services, problems don't always happen between 9 and 5. You sometimes have to stay late. But he just wouldn't. His coworkers started resenting him because they had to pick up his slack. Then, one day, he just quit. I saw it coming, but it was still a shock. I thought he'd last at least a year, but he didn't. He threw away a career most people would kill for, all for games. After quitting, he seemed happy at first. I was glad for him, because during his last weeks at the firm he looked awful, unshaven, ditching his suits for college bum clothes, and constantly looking angry and exhausted. But the happiness didn't last. He couldn't land another job. He couldn't explain why he left a prestigious firm after less than a year without being fired, and no one wanted to take a risk on him. Employers knew he wasn't cut out for the industry. He ended up driving for Uber and Lyft, then took an admin job and lost it, then bounced through multiple part-time gigs. He mainly chose work based on how much gaming time he'd get afterward. Eventually, he lost his apartment in the city and had to move farther out. His prospects shrank. It was depressing to watch. He had everything lined up for him and just threw it away. Meanwhile, our classmates went on to buy homes, new cars, and start families. He's still trying to fix his life. By that, I mean find a high-paying job while still being home by 5 p.m. to play video games. Story 18. The thread is probably dying, but I'll take a shot. Some context. I'm French, and since I was around 7 years old, my family has spent part of every summer in a small alpine village. We stay in a fairly isolated spot at the edge of a national park, La Vanoise, for those wondering. It's about a kilometer from the main part of the town, and at night, when all the tourists leave, there's basically no one around except us and another family of cheesemakers. Their cows stay in the park during the summer. Naturally, we became friends with that family, and over time they've become very close to us. One day, the wife of the couple shared her story with us, and it really stuck with me. She grew up in Switzerland in an insanely wealthy family. Her father was a businessman and diplomat, and she attended some of the best English schools during her teenage years. But all of a sudden, her father's business collapsed after a bad deal, and overnight they lost everything. Her father took his own life, leaving her mother, her, and her siblings in a very precarious situation. Still, thanks to her connections, she managed to get into university and was even dating a young lab manager from IBM. To support herself through her studies, she spent summers working the grape harvests. It was during one of those harvests that she met her future husband. He was incredibly kind, though he had barely ever left his hometown, rarely visited big cities, and was the son of cheesemakers, destined to become one himself. They fell in love. She abandoned her studies, moved to his village, and they built a life together. Now they're happily married, running a successful business, and raising 2 wonderful children. What's remarkable is that their kids are probably more educated than most I know, despite growing up in such a remote village. They speak fluent English, play the violin, and ice skate. It may seem like an odd pairing, but they're clearly a very happy one. Story 19. Sort of a down-then-up story. My younger sister was a good kid. Our dad was a pastor. Nothing weird, just a genuinely nice guy. Not strict or overly conservative, though we did grow up in a conservative culture. When my sister started high school, I could tell her friends weren't great. At one point, our entire family got copied on an email she supposedly wrote to our new uncle, saying some pretty crude things. It didn't sound like her at all, and it wasn't, but her friends thought it would be funny to mess with her family relationships for a laugh. I let my parents know I was concerned, but they brushed it off, saying they knew her better than I did. I was in college at the time. Then one day I got a call. My dad and sister had gotten into a huge argument. Turns out she had run off with her boyfriend, someone we didn't even know about, who she was sleeping with, and who also happened to be her coke dealer. She was still in high school, and he was only a year older, but still, you can imagine how alarming that was. She ended up getting caught in a sting when her boyfriend was busted dealing out of their house. He ratted out his dealer and got off with probation, as did she. I only learned the full details of that a month ago, even though it happened back in 2003. Despite everything, she stayed in school, got a scholarship, and earned an associate's degree from an art institute. She and that guy moved across the country and even got engaged, but he turned out to be a controlling jerk who wouldn't even let her access their money, even though she was earning more than him. Eventually, when they were supposed to move to another state to start fresh, she had her car packed and told him to drive wherever he was going, because she was heading home. She never spoke to him again. She moved back in with our parents, got a job, and now she's married to a genuinely good guy and has 3 kids. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe, activate the notification bell, and share a similar story or anything you'd like to say in the comments. See you next time.